Just want you to know that's happening. So, hi God, it's me again. We've been having fun with this month. Well, I've been having fun with it, and you keep coming back. So, I think we're probably in sync in that regard. And yeah, today I want to talk about it's the little things. You know what, God? It is just the little things. How often can we acknowledge that? How on earth can I proceed on my living my life full of givingness and livingness and joy and peace and happiness, health and harmony, the success that rightfully belongs to a divine being? How can I proceed on my way when these blankety blank little things keep getting in the way? I should be relieved that they're just little things, right? But it's so annoying when little things get in my way, that all around me are these obstacles. And even though they're little things, they're obstacles that block or retard my great ideas, my grand plans. I was channel surfing the other day. I do that on occasion. And I came across a rerun of an old TV sitcom titled Dharma and Greg. Do any of you remember the Dharma and Greg series? It was an incredible chronicle of when expanded mind meets buttoned down mind. Anyway, Dharma, who was an only child, found herself in the position of being almost 30 years old, getting married. And when shortly after that happened, her mother announced that she herself was pregnant. So Dharma reacts as most only children do, with shock, with disdain, that her parents would dare to replace her with another child, and especially at their age. If she was 30, you can imagine how ancient they were. A baby brother or sister, like it's only a little thing, literally, but figuratively it's a big deal for Dharma, and not a happy one. So while she's grousing and whining, and remember, she's the expanded mind in this relationship, her husband Greg, the button-down mind, is really wondering where she's going with this in mind. He also is an only child, and he really doesn't see it like she sees it. So while she's really into judgment about this new baby in her parents' lives, her mother begins to have problems and ends up at the hospital. The baby's in distress. There is great concern that she may lose it. Dharma's mood immediately changes from feeling sorry for herself to feeling guilty. That somehow her attitude and her behavior about this baby's existence is responsible for the emergency now unfolding. Now, that's not very metaphysical, is it? We know that in the total scheme of things, but in real time, that is, living life at the human level, we can understand and we can feel compassion for her anxiety, and we can maybe even go back into our own lives and think of times when we have felt responsible for something happening in someone else's lives, and we may have carried that with us and perhaps even suppressed that for a while. So we get kind of an empathetic feeling where she's concerned about this. Anyway, the family is all at the hospital waiting for a progress report on the unfolding emergency. Dharma goes for a walk just to get away from all of that and finds herself in the hospital chapel. So she sits there quietly, but she's agonizing over what she thinks she may have done. The camera, remember this is a sitcom, not real life, the camera is shooting her from the front. So we just see a headshot of the anguish in her eyes. But all we can see is her head and her shoulders. And suddenly, we see a hand from behind her reach toward her and rest on her right shoulder. Her face registers surprise, but not fear, because immediately she thinks, a sign has appeared to me. It's an answer to my prayer. And a deep voice from off camera says, gently, you called. I'm here. And as the camera pulls back, we can see behind her, and we see an elderly Native American man. He's dressed in full tribal regalia, complete with face paint and a feather headdress. Walter, she exclaims, how can you be here? And he begins to laugh. And he finishes her sentence. Yes, technically, I'm dead. Doesn't look like you expected, does it? I got to pull this assignment, he says, since you and I had a long, loving relationship, friendship, while I was still here, meaning on planet Earth, in human form. So Dharma quickly begins to explain to him the terrible thing she thinks she has done. So he lets her talk for a while, and then finally he interrupts her. And he says, so you're communing with the Great Spirit, maker of all things. She nods. As he continues, you're communing with the Great Spirit, and you're doing the talking? So the moral of the story, of course, is, and obviously you were way ahead of me there and already know that there's more than one moral to this story, that these lessons like this are examples of how we sometimes let the little things get in the way of our own greater good. Many of those things that get in our way are outside us. That is, until we lay claim to them and make them our own. When we're living in that external world of appearances, how often those obstacles that we need to get past are ones that we have claimed as our own. So you see, what's happening out there I can internalize in a variety of ways. And yet, what's happening out there may be something for me to learn about myself. It doesn't mean that I have influenced or changed that in any way. In fact, how often is it that we have said, you know, I've worked and worked and worked, and that hasn't changed? That's because that doesn't change. I change. So I see it differently. I learn the lesson from it. And for Dharma, there were several lessons in this. So here's what Ernest Holmes has to say about this concept. That our external perceptions are by appearance, and appearances limit our possibilities. Let me say that again. Our external perceptions are by appearance, and appearances limit our possibilities. When we train our consciousness to perceive that true substance is spirit, that spirit is God, or whatever you call that, and that God is all there is, then we can align our consciousness with that creative power and allow it to externalize in our lives. Consciousness externalizes at its own level. One more time on that. Consciousness externalizes at its own level. I am expressing my life at the level of my consciousness of possibilities. Holmes goes on to say, our living is the externalization of ideas and beliefs to which we have given our acceptance. That's the good news. Could be the bad news. The externalization of the ideas and beliefs to which we have given our acceptance. So often when we commune with Spirit, the creator of all things, we are so busy doing the talking that we forget to listen. We get so engrossed in relaying all the external appearances, like lack, like fear, like what other people think or say or do. We get so engrossed in describing all these things that we forget what the real purpose of communing with Spirit actually is. So again, the words of Holmes related to this. Prayer is essential, not for our individual salvation, because we are never lost to or from God. Prayer is essential for the conscious well-being of the individual who does not understand himself or herself. There is a vitality in our communion with the infinite. And that is what is most productive of our highest good. You see, when I am aligning myself with what I know to be a universal, limitless power, I'm aligning myself with something big. And it's bigger than any of these obstacles that I believe are standing in the way in my life, in the present moment. And so I can move past them in a variety of ways. I can go this way or this way or this way or this way. Whatever I choose, when I am open to limitless possibilities, rather than just the ones I already know about, which, by the way, haven't worked up until this point in time. So I open myself to those limitless possibilities. I grab the coattails, if you will, of that vitality that is infinite. So prayer sets into motion our active acceptance as we align with limitless possibilities. Prayer stimulates our understanding of Spirit's ceaseless willingness for our highest good. But like Walter, Dharma's loving shaman, reminds us, when we're doing all the talking, where or when is there any room for Spirit's limitless possibilities to get through? Sometimes we just, in our humanness, have to admit, I just can't sit still long enough or be quiet long enough to meditate. And that's when I do the microwave talk about set the timer on the microwave for 5 minutes and sit down and be quiet for 5 minutes. And when the timer goes off, you don't have to be quiet anymore. But just grant yourself that for 5 minutes. And allow the thoughts to come and go, which they do, sometimes in rapid succession. And after a while, that begins to slow down, not always in 5 minutes, but eventually you'll go from 5 to 6 minutes. Your microwave has that timer on it too, by the minute. You can set it for 6. And allow yourself the opportunity to be silent for even a short period of time. We live in one of the most beautiful places on the earth. And to look at the sky, to look at the ocean, to look at the mountains, there's so many opportunities to put our attention on those in the silence that we are truly blessed with that. So communion with our divine creative energy is an active, conscious, mental movement It's a definite statement in mind. It's a positive affirmation. We don't need to tell God what we don't want. In fact, God doesn't care what we don't want. It only cares for our highest and best good, whatever that is. So when we are expressing what we do expect and accept, we are aligning in a way that unleashes power that we don't even comprehend and probably never will. And that's okay. But we do comprehend the results of it, don't we? When we see them in real time, we comprehend that. So communion may be a different use of the word for some of you than what you grew up with. You can use the word connection instead if you choose. Connection with Spirit is a definite statement in mind. It's a positive affirmation. It removes doubt and fear. There isn't any room for doubt and fear when you're speaking in positive terms. The mind focuses on one thing at a time. That being the case, I choose positive. However, we must let in the realization of the presence of Spirit, divine intelligence. We must be attuned to what results, or we may miss that in all our own noise. So that's the reason for the silence. To give Spirit an opportunity to respond. How does it respond? Doesn't usually show up in full headdress, in tangible, touchy-feely, body type expression, although it can. You know, sometimes somebody will say something to you, and it's like ka-ching. You think to yourself, now there's an idea. Why didn't I think of that? Ooh, you just did. And you just attracted itself to you. So if you expect that God only shows up in full headdress, or only shows up, oh, I forgot to put that on.
That's
Mine, yeah, it's yours.
Sorry. It's on mute at least.
If you expect God to show up with thunder and lightning and an array of fireworks, if that's what you're looking for, you may be disappointed. But in the meantime, something different may occur. It may come on little cat's feet. It may come in the form of a thought that dances through your mind that you immediately say, oh, that's not it. And when you do, usually that's it. And it just takes time to adjust to it. But to be open and being in the silence without all of the distractions is that opportunity for you. So we really don't want to miss it all in the noise, either internal noise or external noise. We want to be alert to it. So here's the thing. God always hears us. The question is, how often do we hear God? And how do we hear God? Well, in many instances, we hear God by means of our own voice. Through our thoughts, our ideas, our expressions, our noticing things, our dialing in and then being alert to what's coming back. It's like a phone call. You know what? You remember phones? Mm-hmm. Before text and email, we had phones, and we still do. So when you make a phone call, it's a two-way conversation, isn't it? A text message is not. An email is not. Facebook, Twitter, and on, those are not. You talk, and then at some point in time, maybe the other person talks. That's not a conversation. So what I'm talking about here is like a phone call. Hi, God, it's me again. So here's what I want to share with you today. Here's what I choose. And God responds. And often it sounds like your own voice because as that idea flits through your mind, the voice you hear is your own. How often do we allow that? How often do we become silent and listen? See, the word communion now, here's the definition of communion. It means to be in close rapport, to be in intimate conversation. You talk, I listen. I talk, you listen. I talk, God listens. God talks, I listen. Two-way conversation. So in order to proceed on my way to a life full of livingness and joy and happiness and health and harmony, the success that rightfully belongs to a divine creation, which we are, to proceed on my way, I need to make a regular practice of communing with my source of being. I need to make a commitment, a regular practice, to be in close rapport and intimate conversation with that which I know to be that creative energy that's always in movement. It means I need to have a practice, what we talk about here every Sunday morning, what we talk about in classes. A practice when I dedicate a sliver of my life to that very thing. I'm developing my intention through spiritual mind treatment, through journaling, through any of a variety. I was going to say meditation, but I take that back. Because in meditation, I'm listening. I'm just still. I'm not really sending out vibes. I'm still. 5 minutes. Make a commitment to yourself if you're not a meditator. This week, at least once, I will do a microwave meditation. And if you are already meditating, to know that that is a time that is opening your very soul up in so many ways that come back to you, pressed down and multiplied. But to have a regular practice so that when I begin to consider, hey God, it's me again, that I'm no longer talking about those obstacles. I'm no longer talking about what's going on the outside that are preventing anything in my life. The conversation is about my intention and clarifying my intention and expanding my intention. In fact, we actually get to the point in spiritual mind treatment and affirmative prayer where we no longer really define the details of our intention. Because what we know is that when we're linked in communion, in intimate conversation, it's already known. So when I say my highest and best good, when I say perfect right order, or even when I say thank you, mahalo, it's already moving in time and space. So, this week, allow yourself some silent time. You live in a place where it's easy to find those opportunities. And to just be still for as long as you can tolerate it. And when your back starts to hurt, or something begins to itch, or buzz around your ear, or whatever, thank you, God, and let it go. And try again another time. But grant yourself those gifts, and you will find that what we call the little things that get in the way eventually become so little we can't find them anymore. And so it is.
Yes. If you want to stand up.